Hello and welcome to ILTV's Israel Daily. I'm Aaron Porras, and coming up in today's newscast, the IDF is finally releasing the details of its probe into the shooting death of journalist Shireen Abu Akleh. Meantime, the IDF stepping up its security operations with over 1,500 arrests in the West Bank since the start of this year alone. And later elections, now just 60 days away. Knesset candidate for the Likud, Boaz Bismuth, joining us to discuss. Finally cleared for publication, the IDF releasing its findings from its internal investigation into the shooting death of Palestinian-American journalist Shireen Abu Akleh on May 11th of this year. Nearly 4 months after the incident, the IDF now publishing the details of its investigation into the tragic death of journalist Shireen Abu Akleh. The publication including the text announcement, a press kit on Jenin, and both IDF body cam footage as well as archive footage of terrorist activities in the Jenin camp, most of which was published by Palestinians on social media. Now, as for the result, no criminal investigation will be opened because despite the high probability that Abu Akleh was shot by the IDF, the press was in no way targeted intentionally. And the United States welcoming the release, particularly as it's reported that the White House has been pushing Jerusalem to do this for months. State Department spokesperson Ned Price stating that Washington, quote, again underscores the importance of accountability in this case, such as policies and procedures to prevent similar incidents from occurring in the future, end quote. But of course, not everyone is sharing Washington's sentiments, with some even claiming the release to be a cover-up.
واضح بأنهم من ناحية يحاولون أن يبقوا الباب مفتوحا على عملية الغموض والتضليل، ومن ناحية أخرى تبرئة ساحتهم بالقول بأنه كان هناك تبادل لإطلاق النار، وهذا كله ثابت كذبه وعدم دقته، لأن كافة التحقيقات وشهادات شهود العيان وكل ما جرى في المنطقة والفيديوهات المسجلة تؤكد عكس ادعائهم بالكامل.
Still, all the findings are in line with previous investigations conducted alongside the United States and independent investigators in July. Following examination of the bullet that allegedly killed Shireen, none could conclusively point their fingers at the IDF. For one, the bullet was too badly damaged for forensic examination, and it's unclear whether the bullet is even the actual round that killed Shireen, as its provenance and chain of custody could not be verified. Neither Shireen's body nor helmet were provided to investigators. The bullet was removed from the body before investigation, and the PA withheld supposed evidence for weeks. On May 11, 2022, American-Palestinian journalist for Al Jazeera Shireen Abu Akleh was killed by a bullet to the head and her teammate injured in the shoulder. IDF forces were in the Jenin refugee camp conducting arrests against Palestinian Islamic Jihad terror suspects when the two reportedly came under crossfire. And now with more on conclusions of the IDF's Shireen Abu Akleh investigation, Lieutenant Colonel Reserves Maurice Hirsch, Director of Legal Strategies with Palestinian Media Watch, international legal expert, and former Chief Military Prosecutor for Judea and Samaria. Thank you so much for being with us. Now, why did it take the IDF so long to release this investigation, especially when it's such a publicized case and the United States has been breathing down Israel's neck?
I think one has to understand and really give credit to the IDF for conducting a thorough investigation. The idea is to really understand what was going on. I think it was a very complicated operational experience, and the understanding of where each force was located, from where each force was firing, who were the enemy in those cases, to create that entire, I think, factual picture is a very difficult undertaking to get into. And I think it's to the IDF's credit that they took the time, that they gathered the information, that they tried to put together as wide a picture as possible, and only then trying to come to some type of a conclusion. As regards the conclusions itself, and I think that really that factual picture is very clearly expressed in the summary released by the IDF of the investigation. It's putting together everything that goes into making up that picture, and then coming up with, I think, which was a very, very harsh, albeit honest picture of what actually happened. The understanding is that even despite all of these investigations, no final conclusion could be reached. The understanding that it was probably a higher probability, as the IDF said, that Shireen Abu Akleh was killed by an IDF soldier is, I think, a very brave thing to say. And it expresses the IDF's true and really a desire to come to a factual conclusion that reflects what actually happened.
All right, now, as you likely heard, Al Jazeera and others in the Palestinian Authority are accusing Israel still of a cover-up. How do you respond?
Well, I think the Palestinian Authority should sit quietly by the side. Had they released the evidential information as promptly as it should have been, then we would possibly have known very much better. As I've said before, I think that the Palestinian Authority's goal of hiding what actually happened was that which led to their desire to also not allow Israel to participate in any type of autopsy of the body of Shireen Abu Akleh, which the Palestinian Authority's refusal to hand over promptly the bullet which was allegedly taken from Shireen Abu Akleh's body. All of these measures would have provided a better and more prompt ability in order to get to the proper result of who actually killed Shireen Abu Akleh. And I still think that it is probably not unlikely that the Palestinian Authority knows who actually killed Shireen Abu Akleh, and that those measures were taken in order to hide that truth. As regards Al Jazeera, I think you cannot be surprised by their response. This isn't an objective news agency. This is a news agency with an agenda. They have no factual information whatsoever. They had no access to the body, no access to the bullet, no access to all of the information that was gathered, apart from the systematic information gathered by the Palestinian Authority to support their own narrative. And therefore, any conclusion that they come to and any commentary that they would like to make comes not from a factual position, but rather from a biased position of let's attack Israel. That's Al Jazeera's goal. And I think that their comments should be put in that context.
All right, now, as former chief prosecutor in the IDF, do you agree with ending the probe without charges? Regardless of intent, a journalist is dead, and it's not clear why the IDF was firing in that direction.
Well, I think it's impossible to know exactly what was going on at that scene at the time. There, as we saw and as we know from the press and as we know also from the same IDF report, that there were gun battles going on in that location at the time that Shireen Abu Akleh was killed. And therefore, in that type of a situation, where you even have an innocent, a non-combatant killed as part of those military operations, this isn't something which is subject to a criminal investigation. A criminal investigation is opened when you have a suspicion that someone committed a criminal act. In a case of crossfire between the IDF and Palestinian terrorists, Fatah terrorists, or Hamas terrorists, or Jihad Islamic terrorists, whoever they may have been, there isn't any type of real basis to say that, well, someone specifically targeted a non-combatant. And therefore, there is no real basis for opening a criminal investigation. I have to understand that the laws of war allow for instances in which non-combatants are unfortunately killed as part of military operations without there being any basis whatsoever to demand a criminal investigation.
All right, Lieutenant Colonel Hirsch, thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Moving on top of the Shireen Abu Akleh investigations, the IDF releasing its data on terror in the West Bank since the start of this year, and the report is concerning to say the least. ILTV's Kayla Eberlin reporting.
Early Tuesday morning, a 29-year-old Palestinian killed and 16 others injured as they clashed with IDF forces in the Jenin refugee camp. Thankfully, no IDF soldiers were injured, but the Palestinians opening fire rioting and throwing both stones and explosives at the troops who had arrived to demolish the home of Raed Qassem, the terrorist who killed 3 civilians at a Tel Aviv bar last April.
Hi everyone, it's Emmanuel Kadosh. I wanted to invite you all to subscribe to ILTV+, where you can find our daily news and updates about Israel. And not only that, but live feeds, entertainment, our kosher food show, and so much more. Needless to say, your subscription to ILTV+ helps us grow and create more content while also supporting the state of Israel. Our app is available on all platforms and devices, so I'll see you guys there.